I want to say at the outset that I'm not the first person to find it. I know that now. I want to say it because the temptation, the almost gravitational pull, is to tell this as though I alone stumbled onto something hidden, as though the discovery were mine. It wasn't. It was waiting in the records, the way a step is waiting in a staircase. I just happened to be the next foot. My name is Carla Brenne. For the last 3 years, I've worked as a land records technician for Harmon County, Ohio. If you don't know what that means, and there's no reason you would, it means I spend my days translating old property records into a modern geographic information system. Deeds, plats, boundary surveys, easement filings, tax maps. Harmon County has records going back to 1806. Some of them handwritten on paper that feels like cloth, and the state mandated that every county digitize and reconcile their full cadastral archive by 2024. We missed the deadline. Most counties did. There's only 3 of us in the office, and the records are a mess. I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean that when Harmon County was, partitioned from what used to be part of Ross County in 1839, the boundary descriptions were written using reference trees, creek bends, and stone cairns that no longer exist. You'll read a deed that says beginning at the White Oak on the north bank of Stillman's Run, thence south-southeast 47 chains to the blazed Hickory, and you have to figure out where that is now. When Stillman's Run was dammed in 1952, and the White Oak has been a Wendy's parking lot since 1988. It's puzzle work. Tedious, granular, and, I'll be honest, I find it satisfying in a way I've never been able to fully explain to anyone at a dinner party. The job is essentially make the old world match the new world. Parcel by parcel, confirm that what the paper says exists still exists, update the coordinates, scan the documents, link everything in the GIS. When something doesn't match, you flag it, research it, and resolve it. Parcels get merged, subdivided, abandoned, seized for back taxes, consumed by road projects. There's always a paper trail. You just have to find it. I need you to hold on to that sentence. There's always a paper trail. That is the foundational assumption of my work. In 3 years, across thousands of parcels, it has never once failed me. Records may be misfiled, damaged, or absurdly difficult to trace, but they exist. Every piece of land in this county has a documentary history, because land is the one thing human beings have never been casual about recording. Parcel 1143-00-027-000 had a documentary history, a remarkably thorough one. I found it in the normal way working through Township Range 11, Section 14, a rural section in the southeast corner of the county, mostly agricultural, a few woodlots, nothing notable. I was reconciling a batch of about 40 parcels in that section against the current GIS layer when the system flagged a discrepancy. The old paper tax map showed a 2.7-acre parcel between what are now parcels 026 and 028, a narrow strip of land running roughly north-south along a low ridge above Salt Lick Creek. The current GIS layer didn't have it. Parcels 026 and 028 shared a common boundary with no gap. This happens. Its parcels get absorbed. I pulled the chain of title for 027, expecting to find a merger document. Maybe a quitclaim deed, folding it into 026 or 028. Maybe a county road vacation, maybe a tax forfeiture. What I found instead was an unbroken ownership chain going back to 1843. Let me tell you what an unbroken chain of title looks like for a parcel this old. Because the completeness is part of what made this wrong. The original land patent was issued to a Josiah Caulfield in 1843. A federal patent, meaning it was carved from public domain land and sold. The deed was recorded in Book 7, page 214 of the Harmon County Recorder's Office. The legal description was metes and bounds, originating at a sandstone marker at the south end of the ridge and proceeding by compass bearings and chain lengths to form an irregular polygon, standard for the period. Josiah Caulfield paid property taxes on parcel 027 from 1844 through 1871. In 1871, the parcel was conveyed by warranty deed to a Margaret Caulfield, presumably his wife or daughter. Margaret paid taxes through 1903. In 1903, it was conveyed to an Elias Caulfield, Elias through 1938. Then to a Ruth Arden, née Caulfield, Ruth through 1967, then to a Samuel Arden, Samuel through 1994, then to a name I will come back to. This was not a sparse record. Every conveyance was properly executed, properly witnessed, properly recorded. There were tax receipts in the file, actual receipts, the little carbon-backed slips the county auditor's office used to generate before everything went digital. There was a soil conservation survey from 1961 stamped by the USDA. Yet there was an easement filing from 1978, granting the electric cooperative a right-of-way across the northeast corner. There was a building inspection report from 1987 for a structure described as a single-story wood-frame residential dwelling, approximately 600 square feet, well and septic, no code violations noted. There was, in other words, a house on a piece of land, with a family in it, documented with a continuity and thoroughness that most parcels in this county cannot match. In the GIS, said the parcel did not exist. I assumed a data entry error. I went to the physical tax maps, the big linen-backed sheets in the flat files downstairs. Section 14, Township Range 11. I found parcel 026. I found parcel 028. Between them, parcel 027, clearly drawn, clearly labeled, clearly bounded. It was on the old map. It was not on the new one. I checked the digitization log to see who had processed Section 14. The log said it had been processed by a technician named Dale Metler, who left the office before I was hired. His initials were on the batch sheet. But next to parcel 027, instead of the usual completion code, there was a handwritten note in small, careful letters. See file. No file was attached. No file was referenced. Just see file. I asked my supervisor, Linda Polovich, about Dale Metler. She said he'd worked in the office for almost 9 years and left abruptly in 2021. She said the county had been short-staffed since. She said she didn't know much about his personal reasons for leaving and that it wasn't her business. The way she said it, flatly, it's with a small pause before personal reasons, made me think she knew more than she was offering, but I didn't press it. I had a discrepancy to resolve. That was my job. The personal histories of former technicians were not. I decided to do what I always do when paper and digital disagree. Go to the site, stand on the ground, look at what's actually there. I drove out to Section 14 on a Thursday afternoon in October. Salt Lick Creek runs through a shallow valley there, and the ridge above it is wooded, mostly second-growth oak and hickory, the kind of land that was probably farmed a century ago and has since been left to reforest. Parcel 026 is a hayfield owned by an older couple named Stassen. Parcel 028 is a woodlot owned by a family trust. Between them, according to the paper map, should be 2.7 acres of ridgeline with a house on it. When I parked on the township road and walked the boundary, there was no gap. The Stassen hayfield ended at a wire fence. On the other side of the wire fence, the woodlot began. No seam, no remnant, no clearing, no foundation, no driveway, no trace of a structure or a human presence. The wire fence was old but intact, rusted with wooden posts showing 20 or 30 years of weathering. The trees on the woodlot side were mature, 50 or 60 years of growth at least. If there had ever been a 600 square foot house and a cleared 2.7 acre parcel here, the land had healed over it so completely that not even a depression remained. But that wasn't what unsettled me. Old homesteads disappear. Wood rots. Foundations get buried. What unsettled me was the fence. The Stassen property and the Woodlot Trust property shared a common boundary fence. If Parcel 027 had ever physically existed between them, there would have been two fences, one on each side of 027, separating it from its neighbors. Or at minimum, evidence of old fence lines, post remnants, wire fragments in the soil. I walked the full length of the boundary. One fence, continuous. No sign it had ever been moved, replaced, or reconfigured. I stood there for a while. The light was getting low. The trees on the ridge were half bare, and through them I could see the creek below, a dull silver line. It was quiet. Not ominously quiet, just rural quiet, the kind I'm used to. But I had the thought, clear, unbidden, specific, that I was standing in a place that had been edited. That the landscape I was looking at was a clean version of something, and the tracked changes had been deleted. I drove back to the office. I pulled the file again. I looked at the most recent conveyance in the chain of title, the one after Samuel Arden, the one I said I'd come back to. In 1994, Samuel Arden conveyed Parcel 027 by warranty deed to a person named Marin Arden. The deed was recorded in Book 438, page 12. The consideration listed was $1, a nominal transfer, the kind used within families. Marin Arden had been paying the property taxes from 1994 to the present. Meaning someone was currently paying property taxes on a parcel that did not physically exist, and the county was currently accepting those payments. I pulled the current tax records. Marin Arden Parcel 1143-00-02 7-000. Annual tax $47.16. Paid every year. No delinquency, no correspondence, no challenges, no appeals, no abatements. Just a check every year. I'm from an address in Harmon County that, when I looked it up, was a P.O. box at the post office in Delroy, a town of about 400 people, 12 miles from the parcel site. I want to tell you that this is when I felt afraid. But that's not true. What I felt was the specific professional discomfort of a record that is complete, coherent, and wrong. Not wrong in the way that errors are wrong, missing a digit, transposing a name. Wrong in the way that a perfect forgery is wrong. Everything about Parcel 027's documentary record was too correct, too continuous, too well-maintained, too present. Most parcels in this county have gaps. Missing receipts, unrecorded transfers, periods of tax delinquency. Parcel 027 had none. It was the best documented parcel in Section 14, and it was the only one that wasn't real. The next morning, I called the Harmon County Auditor's office and asked to speak with someone in the real property division about a parcel discrepancy. I was transferred to a woman named Donna who had been in that office for 22 years. I gave her the parcel number. I told her I'd found a fully documented parcel with no corresponding physical land. There was a pause. Not long. You had 3 seconds, maybe 4. But the quality of the silence changed. I could hear her breathing shift. She said, "Hold on," and put me on hold for almost 6 minutes. When she came back, she said that the auditor's office showed parcel 027 as active, taxes current, and that if I had a discrepancy between the paper maps and the GIS, I should flag it for the county engineer's review. Her voice was careful, not hostile. It was careful the way people are careful when they're reading from a script they've been given for a situation they hoped wouldn't come up again. I said, "Donna, has anyone else asked about this parcel?" She said, "I'm going to transfer you to the county engineer's voicemail." She transferred me. I left a message. No one returned the call. I left a second message 2 days later. No one returned that one either. I want to be precise about the sequence of what happened next because the order matters. And because when I tell it out of order in my own head, which I sometimes do now, late at night, the logic of it softens, and I can almost convince myself it was just a bureaucratic anomaly, a weird edge case. The kind of thing that happens when county records go back 2 centuries and nobody audits them properly. The sequence keeps me honest. On Monday, I searched the county recorder's digital index for every document associated with parcel 027. I found the deeds, the easements, the tax records I'd already seen. But I also found something I'd missed on the first pass, a document filed in 1974, classified as a miscellaneous instrument, which is a catch-all category for filings that don't fit standard deed, mortgage, or lien classifications. The instrument number was 1974-M-00661. I pulled the scanned image. It was a single page typed on a manual typewriter, filed by an individual named Gregor Arden. It read, "I, Gregor Arden, being of sound mind, do hereby declare and record that the property described as Parcel 1-143-00-027-000, situated on the ridge above Salt Lick Creek in Section 14, Township Range 11, Harmon County, Ohio, which is held in continuous trust for the purpose of maintenance, and that this maintenance shall not be interrupted by any future holder, so long as the described property continues to be received by the recording systems of Harmon County. So long as the described property continues to be received. Not so long as the property exists. Not so long as the property is occupied or used or owned. Received by the recording systems. As though the land's existence depended not on geology, but on the county's willingness to keep filing paperwork about it. I read it 3 times. Then I read it again. Then I pulled every miscellaneous instrument filed by anyone named Arden in the Harmon County Recorder's Index. There were 4. 1941. Ruth Arden. Substantially identical language. Continuous trust for the purpose of maintenance. He shall not be interrupted, so long as the described property continues to be received. 1912, Elias Caulfield, the family name before the Arden marriages. Same language. 1882, Margaret Caulfield. Same language, handwritten rather than typed, but word for word the same. 4 times across 92 years, members of the same family had walked into the Harmon County Recorder's office and filed a document that said, in essence, keep recording this land and do not stop recording this land because the recording is what holds it. This is not a legal instrument that exists. There is no such thing in Ohio property law as a declaration of continuous trust for the purpose of maintenance that makes a parcel's existence contingent on its bureaucratic documentation. It's not a conservation easement. It's not a deed restriction. It's not anything. A competent recorder should have rejected it as non-conforming, or at minimum, questioned its legal basis. 4 different recorders across nearly a century accepted and filed it without comment. That night, I couldn't sleep. And instead of doing what a reasonable person would do, which is flag the parcel as anomalous in the system, write a memo and let the county engineer sort it out, I did something that I suspect Dale Mettler also did at approximately this same point in the process, because I was beginning to understand what C-file meant, and the file was not in the office. The file was the parcel itself. I drove back to the site. It was after 10, cold, clear, no moon, which meant the stars were very bright once I was out of the township road's tree cover. I parked in the same spot. I brought a flashlight and my GPS unit and a printout of the original 1843 meets and bounds description, which I'd converted to modern coordinates that afternoon. I want to tell you I found something, a ruin, a foundation, a door in the hillside, something to make this story move the way stories are supposed to move. I didn't. I stood at the coordinates and there was nothing. Trees, leaves, soil, the smell of cold water from the creek below. My GPS said I was standing inside parcel 027. My eyes said I was standing in an unbroken woodlot that had been growing undisturbed for decades. But I did something, and I'm not sure why. Or rather, I am sure why. And the reason is that I had been reading the Arden family's filings, and the word received was in my head like a stone in a shoe. I took out my phone, and I opened the county auditor's public parcel viewer, the same GIS I use at work, accessible to anyone online. And I searched for parcel 027. It came up. On my phone's screen, standing in the middle of the parcel, I could see it. A clean polygon overlaid on the satellite imagery, or outlined in yellow, labeled with the parcel number and the owner's name. Marin Arden, 2.7 acres. I looked at the satellite imagery inside the polygon. It showed a clearing, a small house, a gravel path leading to the township road, a garden it looked like, on the south side. The image was slightly blurry, low resolution compared to the surrounding parcels, as though it had been captured by a different sensor or at a different time. But it was there. A house, on a cleared lot, on a ridge above Salt Lick Creek. I looked up from my phone. I was standing where the house should have been. There was no house. There were trees. I looked back at my phone. The house was on the screen. I turned in a slow circle, holding the phone up, watching the GPS dot my position to move slightly on the map. I was inside the parcel. I was inside the image of the house. And around me, in every direction, there was only forest. I want to be very specific about what I felt. I did not feel terror. I did not feel the sudden dramatic horror of a revelation. What I felt was a low spreading nausea, and the nausea of two realities being true simultaneously and being unable to resolve them. The county system said there was a house here. The county system was, in a sense, looking at a house right now. And I was standing in the place where the county was looking, and there was no house, and the system did not care. So long as the described property continues to be received by the recording systems. I drove home. I did not sleep. In the morning, I went to work and I began doing something I should not have done, which was to search the county's internal records. Not the public-facing system, but the back end. For any administrative notes, flags, or internal correspondence related to Parcel 027. I found Dale Mettler's file. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't sealed or password protected or buried. It was in the shared drive, in a folder labeled with his name, in a subfolder labeled 027. It contained 14 documents, scanned handwritten notes mostly, photographs, a timeline, and a letter. Dale had found the parcel the same way I had, during routine digitization, flagged by the same discrepancy. He'd gone through the same steps: chain of title, field visit, the Arden declarations, the satellite image anomaly. His notes were meticulous. He was clearly a careful, methodical person. But his investigation had gone further than mine, and because he had done something I had not yet done, he had found Marin Arden. According to Dale's notes, he drove to the P.O. box address in Delroy and asked at the post office who rented the box. They wouldn't tell him, and in postal regulations. So he waited. He came back every day for 4 days. On the 4th day, he saw a woman retrieve mail from the box. He described her as mid-50s, small, gray-haired, wearing work clothes. He approached her outside and identified himself as a county land records technician. He said he had questions about a property she owned. He said she looked at him, and I'm quoting his notes now, the way you look at someone you've been expecting. She agreed to talk. They sat in his car in the post office parking lot. He asked about the parcel. His notes from the conversation are fragmentary, written after the fact, I think, from memory. But the key passages are clear. He asked, "Does the property still have a structure on it?" She said, "That depends on what you mean by on it." He asked, "What do you mean?" She said, "The house is where it's always been. Whether it's on the land or whether the land is in the house. I used to think those were the same thing." He asked, "I went to the site. There's nothing there." She said, "There's nothing there for you because you went there with your body. The house isn't for bodies. It hasn't been for a long time." He asked, "What is it for?" She said, "It's for the records. The records are how it breathes. As long as someone files the paper and someone else receives the paper, the house is there. Where there is, I can't tell you. I don't think it's a question that has an answer in the way you want it to. But it's real. It's more real than most of what you've got in your system. Most of your parcels are just dirt that people agreed to call something. This one is something that agreed to be called a parcel." Dale's notes get less structured after this point. He met with her 2 more times. In the second meeting, she told him the family history. The Caulfield family had settled the ridge in the 1840s. They'd built a house. For the first 30 years, it was a normal homestead, farming, children, the usual pioneer arithmetic of labor and loss. But something had happened in the 1870s. Marin didn't know exactly what. The family records from that period were thin, and what she knew was that Margaret Caulfield, the woman who took ownership in 1871, had filed the first declaration in 1882, and that from that point forward, every generation understood the same thing. The house was no longer a house in the way that other houses were houses. It had become something else, something that existed in the record of itself, more than in the fact of itself. And the family's job, the The only job, the job that superseded farming, superseded money, superseded everything, was to keep the record alive. They didn't know why. Or if they had known once, the reason had been lost in the same way the house had been lost, gradually over generations, until only the practice remained. Marin told Dale that she was the last. No children, no nieces or nephews who knew about the parcel or would understand the obligation. When she was 61 and she had been filing the declarations and paying the taxes and maintaining the parcel's place in the county system since 1994. Before her, it was Samuel. Before Samuel, it was Ruth. An unbroken chain of people feeding paperwork into a system so that a place that no longer existed in physical space would continue to exist in documentary space. She told Dale, "I don't know what happens if the record stops. Nobody in my family has ever let it stop. That's not an experiment I'm willing to run." Dale asked her about the satellite image. The house, visible on the screen but not on the ground. She said she didn't know anything about satellite images. She said she'd never used a computer. She said the house was in the filing cabinet in the recorder's office, in the tax rolls in the auditor's office, in the declarations in the miscellaneous instruments index. That was where the house was. The ridge above Salt Lick Creek was where the house had been. These were not the same thing, and the distinction mattered. Dale's final note was dated 3 weeks after his last meeting with Marin. It was short. I went back to the site at night. I brought the handheld GPS and the auditor's parcel viewer on my phone, same as before. I stood in the parcel. I could see the house on the screen. I zoomed in. There was a light on inside. I zoomed in further. The resolution shouldn't have supported this level of detail, but the image kept getting sharper the more I looked, as though the system was generating detail in response to attention. There was a window. The window had a curtain. The curtain was half drawn. Behind it, the light was warm and yellow, like a kerosene lamp. I could see a shape moving behind the curtain. I closed the app. I put the phone in my pocket. I stood in the dark on the ridge above Salt Lick Creek and I listened. I could hear the creek. I could hear wind in the bare trees. And under that, or maybe not under it, maybe beside it, in a register that isn't quite sound, I could hear something that my body interpreted as someone moving around inside a house, a floorboard sound, a settling sound, the sound of a place that is occupied. I'm going to stop working on this parcel. I am going to mark it C file and leave the file where someone can find it. I don't think the parcel is dangerous. I think the parcel is what Marin says it is. A place that is alive because it is documented and that will die if the documentation stops. I don't think it wants anything from me. I think it is the loneliest thing I have ever encountered. And I think if I keep looking at it, I will not be able to stop. And I think that is the danger. Not that the house is a trap, but that the house is a home. And I haven't had one of those in a long time. And the house knows that, the way a system knows what you're searching for before you finish typing. I need to leave this job. I'm sorry for whoever finds this. Dale Mettler left the office in November 2021. Linda confirmed this. She said he didn't give a reason. She said he left his files in good order, which was true. Everything was meticulous except for one parcel. I sat at my desk after reading his notes, and I thought about several things simultaneously. I thought about the Caulfield family maintaining a record for 150 years. I thought about Marin Arden 61 years old, driving to the post office in Delroy to collect correspondence about a parcel that existed only as a county's willingness to believe in it. I thought about the satellite image. I thought about the light in the window. And I thought about what happens when Maren Arden dies. Because she'd told Dale she was the last. No children, no one to carry the practice. When she stops paying the taxes, the county will eventually move the parcel to delinquent status. After a statutory period, it will be offered at a tax sale. No one will buy it because there's nothing to buy. No physical land, no structure, no value. It will be forfeited to the county. The county will remove it from the active rolls. The parcel number will be deactivated. The records will be archived, which then eventually purged during a routine data cleanup. And whatever is in that house, whatever has been in that house, breathing, moving behind a curtain, sustained for a century and a half by the simple continued act of institutional belief, will lose the only thread connecting it to existence. I did something I shouldn't have. I pulled the auditor's records and found the return address on Maren Arden's tax payments. It was not the P.O. box. It was a rural route address on the other side of the county. I drove there on my lunch break. The house was small, white, well kept in the way that old rural houses are, when the occupant has more discipline than money. There was a truck in the driveway. I knocked. Maren Arden opened the door and looked at me the way Dale Mettler had described, like someone she'd been expecting. She said, "You're the new one," I said. "I found the file," she said. "Come in." Her kitchen was clean and cold. She made coffee on a stovetop percolator. She moved carefully, the way people move when their joints have started to betray them. She didn't ask what I knew. She seemed to assume I knew what Dale had known, which meant she assumed the file had done its work. I asked her the question that had been growing in me since I read Dale's notes, the question he hadn't asked, the question that felt like the actual center of this. "Who is in the house?" She poured the coffee. She set a cup in front of me. She sat down. "All of them," she said. I waited. It started with Margaret. Something happened to Margaret's son, her first son, Thomas. He was 7. He died in the winter of 1870. I don't know from what. Fever, probably. That's what it usually was. He was buried on the ridge, behind the house. Margaret's husband was already gone, killed in the war. So it was just Margaret on that land with a dead child in the ground and a house that she could not leave because leaving it meant leaving him. Maren's voice was even, not cold. Even in the way that a thing is, even when it has been told many times, and the teller has found the only speed at which it can be spoken without breaking. She didn't leave. But the land, I don't know how to say this in a way that makes sense to someone who works with coordinates and legal descriptions. The land started to go with her grief, not the dirt. The dirt stayed. The place, the way the land was a place, was a home, was somewhere that mattered to someone, that started to move inward. Like the land was folding into the record of itself. Like Margaret's refusal to leave was so complete that the house decided it didn't need to be on the ridge anymore. It just needed to be known about. As long as someone knew it was there, as long as the county had it in the books, it was there. Just not where you could walk to it. She looked at me. Margaret filed the first declaration because she figured out what was happening. She understood that the house had moved into the paperwork and that the paperwork was what kept it real. She told Elias, Elias told Ruth, Ruth told Samuel. Samuel told me. And Thomas? I said. Thomas is in the house. Margaret is in the house. Elias, Ruth, Samuel, my mother, who died when I was 12, my father, who died when I was 30. They're all in the house. That's what the house is for. It's the place you go when you can't leave. When your grief, or your love, or whatever you want to call it, is so total that leaving is not a thing your soul will do. The house holds them. The records keep the house. I asked her, "Have you seen them?" She said, "I don't own a computer. I've never looked at the satellite. I don't need to see them. I know they're there because I file the paper and the county receives the paper, and as long as that transaction continues, the house breathes. That's enough. And when you..." I stopped. "When I die," she said without flinching. "Yes. That's the question, isn't it?" We sat in the cold kitchen. The percolator ticked as it cooled. "I've been thinking about that for a long time," she said. "Longer than you'd expect. I started thinking about it the day Samuel died, which was the day I became the last one. I've had 32 years to think about it. Is there a way to make it permanent? To set up some kind of automatic payment, some trust, some legal mechanism that keeps the taxes paid and the filings active after I'm gone?" She almost smiled. "I've looked into it. In case you can't automate a declaration, you can prepay taxes, but only a few years in advance. And even if you could pay 100 years ahead, eventually the county will audit the rolls, find a parcel with no physical correlate, and purge it. The system cleans itself. It's designed to discard things that don't match reality. That's what you do, isn't it? Make the old world match the new world." She said it without accusation. She said it the way you state a weather condition. "There's another option," she said. "Someone could take over the parcel. I could deed it to someone who understands what it is and agrees to maintain it. But I'd need to find a person like that, and I'm 63 now and I don't go many places. And the kind of person who would believe this is not the kind of person I know how to find." She looked at me. "Except," she said, "every few years the county sends someone to reconcile the records, and they find 027 and they come here. Dale came. Before Dale, there was a woman named Christine in 2014, but she didn't read the file. She just reclassified the parcel as a mapping error and moved on, and I had to drive to the recorder's office and make sure the records hadn't been altered. Before Christine, there was someone else, and before that, someone else. The parcel calls to the people whose job it is to care about records. It has to. That's how it survives." I understood then what she was telling me. She was not telling me a ghost story. She was making a request. I said, "Marin, I'm a land records technician. I make $41,000 a year. I'm not a member of your family. I don't have a connection to this place." "You came here twice at night," she said. "Dale told me. He said the next one would come at night too, because the kind of person who follows a file that far doesn't do it out of professional obligation. They do it because they can feel the house. Not see it, not hear it, feel it. The way you feel a room that someone just left. The warmth, the displacement of air. You felt it on the ridge. I hadn't told her I'd been to the ridge at night. Dale couldn't have told her. Dale had never spoken to me. His file said nothing about a future technician visiting the site. She saw my face. "The house knows who comes to look for it," she said. "It has been looked for and looked after for a very long time. It knows the feeling of someone paying attention. I think, and I have thought about this for 32 years, I think that's all it actually is. Attention. A place that exists because someone is willing to do the paperwork that says it exists. And the people inside it exist because the place exists. And the place exists because the paper exists. And the paper exists because someone files it. It's a circle. It's the simplest thing in the world. It's just very hard to keep going. I left Marin Arden's house at 2:15 in the afternoon. I drove back to the office. I sat at my desk. I opened the GIS. I navigated to Section 14, Township Range 11. I found Parcel 027. I zoomed in. The house was there. Small wood frame, tin roof. The image was clearer than it had been before. Sharper, more detailed, as though the system's resolution had improved overnight, or as though the house had moved closer to the surface of the image. I could see the garden on the south side, brown and spent for winter. I could see a woodpile near the back door, neatly stacked. I could see that the front door was painted a dark color, green or blue. Hard to tell at this resolution. I could see that the front door was open, not broken, not hanging. Open the way a door is open when someone has opened it and left it that way. Open the way a door is open when someone is expected. I stared at it for a long time. The office was quiet. Linda had gone for the day. The other technician, Paul, was at a training. I was alone with the screen and the image and the open door. I closed the GIS. I opened a blank document. Like I began to type a memo to the county engineer recommending a formal review of Parcel 1143-00-027-000 to resolve the discrepancy between the cadastral record and the physical survey. I typed 3 sentences. I stopped. I deleted the memo. I opened a new document. I typed a different kind of letter. A letter to the Harmon County Recorder requesting the necessary forms to record a transfer of real property. I didn't know if Marin would go through with it. I didn't know if I was the right person. I didn't know if right person was even a meaningful concept here, or if the parcel simply needed a warm body with access to the filing system and the willingness to keep feeding it. I thought about Dale Mettler's final note. I think if I keep looking at it, I will not be able to stop. And I think that is the danger, okay? Not that the house is a trap, but that the house is a home. And I haven't had one of those in a long time. I'm 38. I rent a 1-bedroom apartment in a town I moved to for the job. My parents are dead, both of them, within a year of each other 4 years ago. I have a sister in Oregon I speak to on holidays. I have no children. I have a job that consists of making the old world match the new world, parcel by parcel, until the records are clean and the system is satisfied. And somewhere on a ridge above Salt Lick Creek, in a county whose filing cabinets hold the only proof of its existence, there is a house with a door that is open. Inside that house are people who could not leave, and a warmth that should not still be burning, and a woman's grief from 1870 that turned out to be strong enough to bend the relationship between a place and its documentation, so that the documentation became the more durable of the two. Marin Arden is 63. She will not live forever. The taxes are $47.16 a year. I know what the review board would say. I know what Linda would say. I know what any reasonable person would say. Flag it, file it, let the system clean itself. The system is designed to discard things that don't match reality. That is its purpose. That is my purpose. But I keep thinking, what if the system is wrong about what matches reality? What if a family maintaining a paper trail for 150 years is not a clerical error, but an act of love so sustained and so stubborn that it outlasted the physical world it was describing. What if the most real thing in Section 14 is not the hay field or the woodlot, but the 2.7 acres that exist only because someone has never stopped insisting they exist? I printed the transfer request forms. I put them in an envelope. I wrote Marin Arden's address on the front. I haven't mailed it yet. It's in my desk drawer, under the folder labeled 027. Some mornings I open the drawer and look at it. Some mornings I open the GIS and look at the house. The door is always open. The light, there's a light now, visible even in daytime imagery. A warm glow from the front window. The light is always on. Last Thursday, I zoomed in further than I ever have before. Figured the image should have pixelated. It didn't. It just kept getting sharper, the way Dale described, as though the system was providing detail in response to the act of looking. In the window behind the half-drawn curtain, there was a table. On the table, there was a cup. Beside the cup, there was a chair. The chair was empty. I closed the application. I went home. I sat in my apartment and I ate dinner and I watched the news and I went to bed. And in the dark, I thought about a chair in a house that exists only in the records of a county in southeastern Ohio, and how the chair was empty but the cup was full, and how that meant someone had just poured it, and how that meant someone was expecting company, and how the door was open, and how the door was always open. I haven't mailed the envelope, but I moved it from the bottom of the drawer to the top. The taxes are $47.16 a year. I can afford that. I can afford that for a very long time. And the truth is, and the truth I haven't said yet, the one I've been circling like a surveyor working toward a final pin. The truth is that when I stood on the ridge above Salt Lick Creek in the dark and listened past the wind and the water to the sound that wasn't quite sound, the sound that Dale described as someone moving inside a house, what I heard was not frightening. It was not uncanny. It was not dread. It was the sound of someone setting a table. And I have not had anyone set a table for me in 4 years. I think I'm going to mail the envelope. I think I was always going to mail it. I think the parcel knew I would mail it before I found the file, before I drove to the ridge, before I zoomed into the image and saw the door and the light and the chair. I think the parcel has been looking for me the way I've been looking for it. Through the system, through the records, through the slow, patient machinery of files finding the people who need to find them. Tomorrow I'll mail it. And the next time the taxes come due, I'll pay them. And the house will breathe. And the door will stay open. And maybe, this is the part I can't say with any professional certainty, the part that belongs in no memo and no GIS, maybe one day, the image will sharpen enough that I can see who's sitting in the other chair. And maybe it will be me.